If you bought anything overseas recently, fuel, electronics, or even that loaf of bread you picked up yesterday, its price was probably affected by two critical global waterways.
The Black Sea and the Red Sea.
Exactly. These essential shipping lanes have, they've exploded into active battle zones, and it's fundamentally rewriting the rules of naval warfare and, really, global commerce.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to get you up to speed on what's actually happening in these conflict zones. We're pulling our information from operational maritime security firms, people like Ambry and ARC.
So this is the data that ship captains are reading every single morning.
That's right, and we're pairing that with recent academic and legal analyses to get the full picture.
And in this deep dive, we're looking at three main things: the geopolitical stresses forcing a big U.S. strategic pivot, the revolutionary new, cheap weapons changing the battlefield, and how all this chaos is sort of eroding the international laws that have protected global commerce for centuries.
Yeah, these aren't just regional skirmishes anymore.
No, they're global supply chain events, and they really matter to your everyday life.
Let's jump straight into the immediate threat level then.
Yeah.
Operational intelligence rates it as high across both theaters. We have to start with the Black Sea, where Russia is running a really aggressive, sustained campaign.
A campaign that seems specifically designed to test the limits of NATO protection, right?
It is. They're pushing the boundaries.
And when you look at the scale of these recent attacks, you can see that test in really stark terms. Moscow launched a massive coordinated assault.
The numbers are staggering. We're talking approximately 450 Iranian-derived drones and 30 missiles.
450 drones in a single night.
In one night. And this wasn't military-on-military action.
No.
And that's the critical takeaway. It was a deliberate, audacious show of force. They struck 3 commercial ships flying the Turkish flag.
And Turkey is a NATO member state.
Precisely. They weren't just hitting infrastructure. They were hitting symbols of NATO commerce right there in Chernomorsk.
I see. So you're saying this is Moscow publicly testing the alliance's collective defense commitments. They're seeing exactly what it takes for NATO to respond to an attack on a commercial, non-military asset.
They are checking the perimeter, yeah. And the response, or maybe the lack of a response, sets a really dangerous precedent.
Meanwhile, you've got the same kind of strategic chaos playing out in the Red Sea. The Houthi threat, which had quieted down for a bit, has fully resumed since July 2025.
Is back in a big way. Since November of 2023, we've seen more than 140 related security incidents reported.
And tragically, at least 13 seafarers have been killed.
The human cost is high, absolutely. But the strategic chaos is even broader. What's fascinating here is just how indiscriminate their targeting has become.
That's the part that stands out to me. The Houthis claim they're targeting vessels with links to Israel or the U.S., but the data seems to contradict that.
It does, because the goal isn't just retribution. It's economic damage and coercion. Our analysis shows that nearly 28% of the targeted vessels had no clear link to Israel or the U.S. at all.
So almost a third.
Almost a third. They were neutral flag carriers moving goods for anyone. The strategic calculus is simple. If you make the risk high enough for everyone, you fundamentally drive up the cost of global trade. You punish nations worldwide, regardless of their political alignment.
It's like you're weaponizing the insurance industry against the global economy. If a quarter of your attacks are basically random, you can't really hedge against that risk.
Exactly, and that risk extends far beyond the immediate port areas. In the Black Sea, since the conflict began in February 2022, there have been 37 maritime security incidents involving merchant vessels.
And the really terrifying part, the sea mines.
Right. We've recorded 23 incidents involving sea mines, and they've been reported as far away as Romania.
Which means the sea lanes used by dozens of nations are now, well, they're literally ungovernable minefields. It puts the whole region at high risk of disruption, even just by accident.
And this systemic instability, it's forcing major global players to make some drastic strategic choices. Our intelligence sources are detailing the implications of the incoming U.S. administration,
which is set on this massive pivot starting January 20th, 2025.
Yeah, the core of the strategy is to swiftly, and I'm quoting here, resolve the conflict with Russia.
Why? What's the goal?
The goal is to allow the U.S. to focus its efforts and resources where it believes the biggest long-term challenge lies: China as the primary economic and military adversary.
So less focus, fewer resources, and a desire to declare victory and pull back. But, history shows that simply wanting peace doesn't necessarily achieve a stable peace.
Especially not with an adversary like Russia. That's the crux of the problem. You have to look at Russia's track record.
They have a proven tendency to sign agreements and then just renege on them when it's expedient.
The broken Minsk agreements are the perfect example. The trust is just non-existent.
So even if a ceasefire were negotiated by the incoming administration, this deep institutionalized lack of trust means that insurance companies, the big shipping lines, they're all going to remain fundamentally cautious.
Or outright unwilling to call Ukrainian ports, yeah. The risk of ships being trapped or attacked like we saw in 2022, it's just too credible.
The instability itself has become Russia's most potent weapon.
And they are actively weaponizing food security. The disruption of Ukrainian grain exports through the Black Sea has caused global grain prices to nearly double.
Double.
Yeah, jumping from roughly $270 to $500 per ton.
Let's just pause on that statistic for a moment. That is way more than just inflation. That is engineered economic pressure. What are the global consequences of that kind of price jump?
The consequences are severe, and they primarily hit the most vulnerable. This massive inflation exacerbates food insecurity in regions that rely heavily on Ukrainian grain.
The Middle East, North Africa.
Exactly. And when people can't afford to eat, migration pressures increase, governments destabilize, infernal dissent grows. Russia uses that chaos as leverage to erode Western political will and distract attention from the conflict itself. It's a highly effective, non-kinetic form of warfare.
So in the face of this strategic economic threat, what is the collective European response? I know the EU launched its strategic approach to the Black Sea back in May 2025.
They did. It's built on a three-pillar framework: security, connectivity, and environment. And it includes a promising initiative where Romania is ready to host a Black Sea maritime security hub in Constantia.
So it signals they recognize the problem.
It does. It shows an intent to coordinate security efforts.
But the devil is always in the details, isn't it?
It is. While the policy declaration is strong, the strategy currently lacks a detailed operational plan.
Or dedicated funding.
It's an outline of great idea without the budget or the blueprints to actually start construction. So the gap between political will and financial commitment remains wide, which gives Moscow plenty of room to continue exploiting those vulnerabilities.
Okay, let's shift now to the technology that's driving this new era of instability, because this is where the battlefield has fundamentally changed.
Yeah, we are witnessing what experts are calling a strategic inflection point.
And what does that mean?
That phrase means we've reached a moment where the old way of doing things is suddenly obsolete, usually because of a change in technology. In naval warfare, this inflection point is the transition of uncrewed maritime systems drones, from just being experimental assets to becoming strategic weapons.
Put simply, the cost of attacking is now cheaper than the cost of defending.
Exactly. And we saw this realized dramatically with Ukraine's Sub-Sea Baby, an underwater unmanned vehicle.
The UUV.
Right. In December 2025, that drone successfully struck a Russian Kilo-class submarine. Now, what's significant about this is the Kilo class is designed to be one of the quietest, most elusive submarines in the world.
And this didn't happen in the open ocean.
No. It happened while the sub was berthed in the heavily fortified Novorossiysk harbor.
Wow. Submarines are supposed to be the ultimate naval sanctuary, so this success demonstrates that those traditional sanctuaries are just. They're not secure anymore.
Not against low-cost, expendable systems, no. Navies worldwide, including the U.S. Navy, are now being forced to rethink their entire multi-billion-dollar harder defense strategies. It's like a computer virus taking down a heavily defended mainframe.
And the geographic reach of this new warfare is just massive. Ukraine used long-range aerial drones to strike the tanker Qendil.
Which was part of the Russian Shadow Fleet, yeah.
And the strike took place in the Mediterranean Sea, off the coast of Crete.
Crete is more than 2,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border.
So this isn't a localized conflict. This campaign is now stretching deep into international waters. Does this mean that literally no commercial shipping route is safe anymore if a belligerent decides to strike a vessel they dislike?
That is precisely the challenge. It fundamentally expands the conflict zone, and it challenges the long-held assumption that commercial vessels aiding adversaries are safe once they get into neutral waters.
And the same technological shift is making the Red Sea far deadlier. The Houthis are moving beyond just single shots.
Oh, they have dramatically elevated their game. The attacks reported since July 2025 were highly coordinated, large-scale assaults using a combination of kinetic weapons.
So anti-ship ballistic missiles, aerial drones.
And uncrewed surface vehicles, or USVs. You can think of a USV as a cheap, remote-controlled torpedo.
This kind of coordinated scale, it sounds like overwhelming force. What does that mean for the private armed security teams that so many ships rely on?
It means that embarked armed security teams cannot counter this level of complex, overwhelming force.
They're just not equipped for it.
Not at all. When you are facing a swarm of missiles and USVs, the threat profile has fundamentally shifted from, say, a piracy deterrent to a military-grade risk. This increases the probability of sinking and places all crew at severe, unavoidable risk.
This volatility brings us directly to the third crisis then, the systematic dismantling of legal protections for neutral commerce. It's testing the very laws of neutrality and the UN Charter that govern the high seas.
This needs a bit of context. Historically, under the traditional laws of war, belligerents often permitted blockades and even the targeting of neutral ships suspected of aiding the enemy.
But after World War II, the UN Charter introduced a much more restrictive framework. How does the UN Charter change that equation?
Well, it prohibits the aggressive use of force. So any force used against neutral ships must be justified by self-defense. This key legal difference means that self-defense does not permit general blockades or indiscriminate operations against neutral vessels that are operating outside territorial waters.
So you can only target a specific ship that's engaged in a demonstrable hostile act, not just a whole class of ships in international waters.
Exactly. Yet we see belligerents today, both state and non-state actors, increasingly disregarding these restraints. They're normalizing attacks on neutral merchant shipping in this growing legal gray zone.
It's like they're choosing to act as if the UN Charter just doesn't apply on the high seas.
A great way to understand the legal red line being crossed here is to look back at Israel's 2010 Gaza flotilla interception.
That happened 72 nautical miles off the coast, right? In international waters.
Right. And while it was controversial for many reasons, the most relevant detail for us is that it was met with widespread, explicit protests from other states. And they specifically highlighted the attack on neutral ships outside territorial waters.
So that international outcry effectively affirmed the legal view that indiscriminate force against neutrals, especially that far from a state's own coast, is highly contested and potentially illegal in the post-UN Charter era.
And now the rules are collapsing because powerful actors are choosing to ignore them with very little consequence.
That really is the summation of the current crisis, isn't it? When states lose the ability or the will to enforce the rules just cease to matter.
They do.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize the three tectonic shifts we've uncovered in this deep dive. First, geopolitical focus is shifting. The U.S. is preparing to pivot toward China, leaving a power vacuum and maritime instability in these critical choke points.
Second, cheap, unmanned technology is fundamentally replacing expensive naval dominance. That $400 million submarine is now vulnerable to an expendable drone, holding multi-billion-dollar military and commercial assets at risk.
And finally, the rules of the road at sea, which protected commerce for centuries, are collapsing under the weight of this new asymmetric warfare.
The implications for global trade and security are profound and immediate. I mean, we're seeing major countries targeting global food supply chains and tankers on the high seas with near impunity.
So if global powers can no longer guarantee the safety of commercial vessels in these critical choke points,
the entire global economy is now being held hostage by these proliferating low-cost technologies.
this leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider. What happens to the cost of everyday goods, from energy to bread, when geopolitical crises turn the world's major shipping highways into ungovernable minefields? Think about that the next time you look at the price tag at the grocery store and realize the price of stability just went up.